Hello and welcome back to another video. I'm Zelp and today we are going to take a look at how corrosive projection is going to match up with something like a damage aura, for example, rifle M. So in order to do this testing, it's going to be more of a theoretical base. We are theory crafting, and the values that I'm getting here is based off a previous video where I have the armor slowly scaling up 50 armor extra at a time, and then the health is fixed at 10,000 and your damage is fixed at 100. So when comparing with corrosive projection and also let's say rifle amp, the aura, then that rifle M is going to change my damage because my initial damage is 100, and then because of rifle M it buffs that up a little bit. And then we are also going to change the armor because of corrosive projection, so corrosive projection will actually lower the armor, and due to that, that's going to change the damage reduction, and therefore that's going to change the overall damage that you do per hit. And then finally we're going to calculate the number of hits that is actually required in order to kill this specific enemy. Now this whole setup is not flawless, it's not perfect. In fact, I would much rather to have, let's say, use a heavy gunner and base all the stats on one specific heavy gunner, like his level and then his armor, and at that level, at that armor, his health, and then find his EHP basically, and then calculate based on how much hits they require to defeat the enemy based off his EHP. And that way we can actually say for sure at the end of the video that, oh, this is definitely better if you're going against a heavy gunner, that maybe corrosive projection is better at this point to this point, and then maybe rifle M is better from this point to point. Now one of the problems that makes it hard for us to do that is because of the changes that they made. They made the armor scale differently, and we do not have a fixed formula for that armor scaling yet, I believe. And that is not it. The health also scales. So what we're doing here is we are limiting a lot of these factors. The scaling of the health is one of them, and also the damage that you do is always consistent, it's always 100. There are also some assumptions that is done here, like for example, you are not using any form of armor reduction abilities or also status. Another assumption is that the damage that you do, that 100 damage, has already been buffed due to serration, and we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. So what you see at the background is basically a fast forward time-lapse thing that I was doing today for the most of the day, thinking of how to do this. So we start off with the corrosive projection. If one person has one corrosive projection, that means all the enemies has a minus 18% armor. For example, the first case is an enemy with 50 armor and 10k health, and then based on that the armor is being reduced, so therefore the damage reduction has also been reduced, and then from there we can actually calculate how much damage you'll be doing, and then from there we can actually also again calculate how much hits is required in order to take it out. Then after that I did a separate column for what if two corrosive projections being used, but this time instead of removing 18% of the enemy's armor, we're going to remove 36, which is 2 corrosive projection. And after that we do something similar for 3 corrosive projection, and finally 4 corrosive projection. We are not taking into account if you were to have a coaxial drift in this particular testing. Now after that we're going to remove all the corrosive projections, and then we're going to put in the rifle M. Now the problem with this part is that I feel like it's not going to be accurate if I were to just buff the initial damage by 27%. Because anyone that uses a rifle primary weapon is most likely going to have serration on. It's one of those mods that there's really no reason for you to not to have on, because of how much damage it increases, and it being a sort of like a separate multiplier among the elements and critical and all that other stuff. It's almost like a must-have. However, in the last video we did talk about the aura mods being the same damage multiplier as things like serration. So this means that the 27% extra damage coming from the rifle M, the aura, is actually not 27% increment of its initial damage. Because if you have serration on, then it's going to add into that serration and then increase. So in fact, based on my calculation, it's going to be even lower. Now I did a small calculation at the side of my spreadsheet. So what I did here is that I assumed that I have an initial 100 damage. If I increase that amount by serration, which is times 2.65, which is an increase of 1.65, 165% damage, then how much damage will I be doing? Then I increase again with the initial, but this time I added a rifle M and a serration. So then I'll see that I actually increase my damage up to 292, and before it was just 265. So now I can find the ratio between these two. So based on one that only has serration and one has serration and rifle M, I actually find that the increment in damage based on these two values is only about 10.2%. Then I made another scenario where I have two rifle M because maybe two players are rocking the same aura. So two rifle M's and one serration, and then that gives me 319 damage. And then based on that, I compare it with the initial, which is the one with only serration, and I find that it has increased about 20.4%. Then I did the exact same thing for 3 rifle M and also 4 rifle M, and what I realized is that it seems to be increasing about 10.2% for every rifle M added. So now what we need to do is we need to assume that the initial damage, the 100 damage that we're using for our theoretical crafting here, is already been increased by serration. And then I just need to increase this value, this 100 damage, by 10.2%. So after putting in the equation from rifle M to increase my initial damage, I then can calculate how much damage I would end up doing after going through the enemy's armor and the damage reduction, and then from there I can again calculate the number of hits required to kill the enemy. And then I do the exact same thing for 2 rifle M's, 3 rifle M's, and 4 rifle M's, and this is what I got. So if you come over here, you can see that if the enemy has 250 to about 300 armor, that is where the turning point between a damage aura versus corrosive projection. So before, or rather at the start, when the enemy does not have any armor to up to about 250 armor, the damage aura is actually better. It's not better by a lot, but it is better. And then the moment the enemy actually gain more armor up to about 250 to 300, then corrosive projections become way better. And corrosive projection is going to stay dominant after this amount of armor all the way until the end. And I mean, it kind of makes sense because with things like rifle M, it only buffs you in terms of damage by a fixed amount. So your weapon is not going to scale up over time. The damage is still going to be the same, and it's going to increase just that amount. But as you play through, as the enemy scales up in level, it gains more armor. And more armor means reducing your damage more and more. The more armor it has, the better corrosive projection actually ends up doing, because more armor is being reduced since corrosive projection removes the enemy's armor based on percentage. Now I've also taken liberty to make some graphs so that you can see. So you can see the CP1, which is 1 corrosive projection, 2, 3, 4, and then we have the rifle M 1, 2, 3, 4 when it's added. This is very confusing because of all the colors and there's just too many in the line. So what I did was I made 4 separate ones where you can kind of compare between them. So if you have only 1 corrosive projection versus 1 rifle M, at the start rifle M is actually a little bit better, but it's only for a really small part, and then the rest of the part you actually see that the blue one is actually better. In this kind of graph, you want to look at the line that is lower, not the steeper one. The steeper one is actually bad. So what you're looking at is this is the armor and this is the number of hits required to kill the enemy. So you want to look at something that can deal with high armor but low number of hits to kill it. So in this case, you can see that corrosive projection outplays rifle M this much if there's only 1. When there is 2, it outplays it a little bit more. You can see the gap slowly increasing over time, and then this is when there's 3 and this is when there's 4. Now with that said, I believe that if you were to compare it with Pistol M and you have Hornet Strike on, it's going to be worse, as in Corrosive Projection is going to outwin the Pistol M a lot more. But if it is still charged, that gives you, I believe, a 60% bonus, and plus the what's it called, pressure point, that is also relatively pretty good. I believe that the turning point for Corrosive Projection will be a lot later. In fact, I think I'm gonna just cut the video right here and go and make one for pressure point and also still charge. Okay, oh my god. Okay, so let me explain what I've added. I've added still charge into the equation. So these are when there's one still charge, and then 2 still charge, 3, and then 4. And the result is actually a lot more interesting than using the primary weapon with rifle amp. So I'm actually gonna hide this. But before I hide it, I want to show you guys the charts that I've created. So from here you can see that if you were to relate it between the rifle amp and Corrosive Projection, most of the time, only a little bit at the slight beginning, rifle amp actually beats Corrosive Projection, but in the most cases, Corrosive Projection is actually the one that's better. In fact, when you have more on, you can see the difference between them is a lot. Corrosive Projection thus dominates, being better than having 4 rifle amp. But it seems like when it comes to steel charge, it's a little bit different. Now this one is really weird and I cannot explain it. I checked the numbers and I still don't know if I did something wrong or not, or is my logic or something. I just don't know why. But from this particular graph you can see that over time the steel charge actually wins against Corrosive Projection. So at the start, from the beginning, steel charge is way better than having 1 Corrosive Projection. So 1 steel charge is better than having 1 Corrosive Projection. And if you were to look at the gap in between them, it actually opens up instead of merging together. This means that the more armor the enemy seems to have, steel charge is still going to dominate against Corrosive Projection, which doesn't make any sense, because technically the more armor you have, Corrosive Projection being able to remove a percentage of that armor might actually be able to remove more armor and reduce and lower the damage reduction. But I think somehow, I'm not really sure, but it seems like somehow the damage reduction reduced is not fast enough, but I really couldn't work out what is wrong. So I'm gonna put this entire spreadsheet down at the comment section. It's not gonna be in the description. I'm actually gonna make the link and put a comment, and then I'm gonna pin my comment and it's going to be over there so you guys can go over and click it. So yeah, if you are good at maths, feel free to double check what I just did. And then anyway, let me just continue on. If you were to look at this one, pay no attention to the titles, because it doesn't showcase what it's supposed to show. So this is actually number of hits, kind of correct, but it's not exactly just that hit. Okay, so now let's come back to the graph. If you have 2 Corrosive Projection and 2 steel charge, it actually merges somewhere. So somewhere in between, one of them will actually outplay the other. So at the start, steel charge wins against Corrosive Projection. And if you have 3, you can see that Corrosive Projection starts to take the lead very early in the game. And then after that, when you have 4, again, way more earlier than having 3. And this tree makes perfect sense for me, because I get it. You know, the more armor you have, the more you remove, the lesser the damage reduced, the better. However, this one though, this one's still in my mind and I'm still not really sure why. Okay, so similar to the rifle M, I need to calculate first how much does it actually increase in percentage, because although steel charge gives you a 60% extra melee damage, if you have a pressure point that gives you 120%, I'm actually not taking and considering a prime pressure point, because I feel like prime pressure point, maybe not a lot of people have it, but this one definitely everyone could relate to. So if you already have 120% increase, so you can actually see over here that I have this scenario where it's 100 damage increased by 2.2, which is the pressure point. So it increased by 120%. Then you get this value, and this one is when I add the steel charge at the back, and by doing so I get a different value. And then finding the ratio increment between these two is the increment that's given to you because of steel charge, and I get about 27.3%. And I find that it's the same the more steel charge that you have on. Well, technically not one person having on, but if let's say 2 players were to use steel charge, and then this is 3, this is 4, and I find that the increment is always about 27.3%. So therefore I take the initial damage, which is 100, assuming that pressure points are already being included, and I get 100 damage, and then I increase this 100 damage by just 27.3%, and then I use that value to do my evaluation and get the results. So from everything you can actually see that, again, I don't know why it makes no sense to me for the first case, but it seems like one steel charge will always win against one corrosive projection. So if you're playing solo most of the time, don't go with corrosive projection. It seems like it is actually worse, but it also a lot depends, because steel charge is only meant for melee attacks. So if you prefer using your primary, or if you're using secondary, then obviously steel charge is not going to help you, whereas corrosive projection will still give you that sort of like buff. However, with that said, I also could say the same for corrosive projection, because corrosive projection is only mainly for armored enemies. Then I'm gonna hide most of it so that we can have a clearer view. Okay, now this is a lot better. So these are with corrosive projection. The green ones are the one with steel charge. So you can see that for this side, for 1v1 with 1 corrosive projection and 1 steel charge, corrosive projection will lose and steel charge will always be dominating. But when it comes to 2 corrosive projection versus 2 steel charge, it seems like there is a turning point, and the turning point is somewhere in the middle, I think. There you go. At when the enemy has 15.55k armor. So when the enemy has that much armor, then corrosive projection is actually better than having 2 steel charge. And then when it comes to 3 corrosive projection and 3 steel charge, you'll find that the turning point is somewhere here, which is 1550 armor. So when the enemy has 1550 armor, then corrosive projection will actually outshine 3 corrosive projection will outshine 3 steel charge. And then finally with 4, it seems like the turning point is somewhere around here at 800 armor. Then 4 corrosive projection will actually start to rule, and 4 steel charge will do well at the beginning, but after that it just kind of falls off against corrosive projection. So I think that this is a way more interesting stats than the primary weapon, and I'm glad that I took a little bit more time to find out the one for melee. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Help me figure out why this does not converge with corrosive projection, because in theory, you know, the more armor you have, the more corrosive projection is going to remove those armor, therefore the more damage you'll eventually do, even though it's only removing a small amount. Unless maybe the damage reduction actually scales faster than the 18% armor reduced, then that might actually make sense. Okay, so this is pretty much it for the video. I'm sorry with all the numbers. It took me a really long time to get all these things and also making the graph, but there are people who said that they appreciate having graphs instead. Now I do want to point out that this whole thing is being done in less than a day, but I feel like I'm pretty confident that there is no mistakes. However, I couldn't really wrap my head around why one steel charge will always win one corrosive projection. However, other than that, I'm gonna put this up and let me know what you guys think. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.